Welcome to the Buildology Podcast, episode number 2.
I'm Perry.
I'm Randy.
I'm Matt.
I'm Justin. We're here
To help you
Become
A buildologist.
Perry, Randy, Mac, and Justin have a combined 100 plus years of experience in the building and real estate industry. And now they bestow that experience to you to help you become buildologists. This is the Buildology Podcast. We've got building down to a science.
Did you?
little convenience store off the path.
Did you have to look more than once?
Hey guys, okay, we're live now.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, we'll tell that joke later.
Yeah,
I was waiting for a punchline there.
We're live.
We're live.
Why do we always get caught like that? I don't know.
Okay, well, welcome to show number 2. I'm Justin. We got Mac here, Randy, Perry. Just came off kind of a crazy week here. It's monumental week. But before we get into that, let's kind of talk about last week's show. Turned out to be a resounding success, I thought. I mean, I thought it was spectacular. Right now we're sitting around 12,000 views. And by the time this comes out, no telling where it's at. So
I haven't received any death threats. So
no
it's
death threats. No death threats.
No one's told us to hang up our hat yet. So
The feedback has been positive. So that it always, I would call that a successful week.
So last week we brought up the cat in there.
Yes. The cat was topic of some comments. That was true.
yeah, did we get any name suggestions? That's what we talked about.
We got a ton of names. I'm going to start off with Mac throwing some names. What was your favorite name that you got suggested?
I think, and that came from my older son, who happens to be in Denver right now. But I think one was like Puma Furman. Puma
Furman.
That's good.
Captain HVAC. HVAC. Oh, I don't know. There were a few of them.
So my favorite, and this was just in the comments section, I liked Einstein. I thought that kind of fit with the buildologist, and he's got white crazy hair.
Einstein was good.
Einstein's good.
He definitely has the
Yeah.
white hair. No
Yeah.
doubt. Like all of us, as a matter of fact.
Exactly.
Some more than others. So yes,
I wish I could grow mine out as deep as Einstein did. That would be great. Right now, I worry about the lighting that we have blinding a viewer off the top of my head.
Maybe if Einstein is this cat's name, and some point in time in the future, he could make an appearance next to the buildologist scientist guy on the logo.
Oh,
Something like that.
Maybe like Dr. Evil.
Something like that, you know.
There we go.
It's a great
Just
suggestion.
pop up from time to time at different places.
So we're recording this episode a few days later, just because in Texas here, where we're stationed, we have probably I don't know. Once I tweeted out one time mistakenly that this was like the first ever deal, and I got corrected by the news, and they said it happened in 1895, and then instantly my son says, "Do you remember that?"
What did you instantly do after he asked that question?
I frowned. I said, "Come on."
Yeah.
I said, "None of us were here in 1895," and he's like, "You sure, Dad?" And I'm like, "I'm positive."
Yes.
My boys always refer to us back before they invented dirt. That's what he always
Dirt's
says.
pretty old.
Yeah. So if you were around in 1895, you may remember that. I don't know if there's anyone on the planet that was around in 1895.
No.
That would be a stretch.
That would be a pretty. There might be one person that old,
Maybe.
but I don't think so.
All I know is I am ready for summer
Yes.
right now.
So all the people up north that deal with this all the time look at us like we're crazy. So I have family in Philly, and I'm sitting there tweeting out images of 3 inches of snow, and my brother sends me a picture of what 10 inches look like. And I'm like, I can't explain it. I don't know. The whole state went crazy with 3-4 inches of snow.
You know, one of the oddest pictures I found was one of the people that work with my wife sent us a picture of their dog bowl inside their house, completely frozen.
Oh, wow.
Inside the home because they didn't have power.
They didn't have power, yeah. So many
That's
people
right.
lost power and water, and I think unprepared is probably a heavy word for it.
Yeah.
But definitely took us by
I was
surprise.
going to say caught off guard is what came
Caught
to
off
mind.
guard is a better term.
I think we're used to, correct me if I'm wrong, like usually on a hurricane, we deal with hurricanes and floods, and the weather gives us that prediction, but we have a basis to understand that from.
True.
I mean, you see a hurricane coming, and we all prepare for it. We see, 10-degree weather where we don't know.
Yeah, what's really surprising to me is how many builder friends of ours had pipe problems.
Oh yeah.
Well,
We
that's
just like whatever.
I mean, that's shoot. I'm going through a situation like that is not ever fun. We all have our individual stories of us or family members or neighbors having issues, water, cold, heat, power, gas, that type of deal. But I am certainly welcome the knowledge of what it takes to, in the building industry, to be prepared for something like that. My own personal house, yeah, I'm going to look at insulation a little bit differently now. I'm going to look at pipe routing in my new construction a little bit differently. So there was quite a few lessons learned for me in that.
There were.
I agree.
Perry, did you learn anything out of this little adventure?
Well, from a builder's perspective, the thing that I've seen most builders make the mistake of, and I made this the first time when this happening back in the 80s, and that is they didn't flush the toilets. You can drain all the water, you open an outside faucet, you drain all the lines, but you leave the water in the tank of the toilet. And then as it expands, it cracks the tank or breaks the seal. And so then when it thaws out, you've got a broken toilet. And that's something I learned years ago in the 80s.
That's a good one.
Good takeaway.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Here's one that I learned. So this is kind of unusual. I have a buried LP tank, and so I didn't really think. I was like, okay, it's buried. I shouldn't have any problems with that. Well, apparently it got so cold, the line coming into the house. What I had to research, this was kind of crazy, is we had water, and that was fine. But we went to go take a shower, and we have a tankless water heater. It's off of propane. It's not natural gas. And we ran out of hot water. And so I had to go research that one. It was beeping. And what I found out is that what creates the pressure is it's liquid into the tank, and as you use it, it transfers into gas. And that's what creates the pressure in the line. Well, when it got so cold, it didn't transfer at the same rate that the water heater wanted to accept it at. And so the water heater just wouldn't kick on because it's a digital deal. And so I'm sitting here thinking we got water, and we hop into the shower. I'm like, this is kind of nuts. It's ice cold. It's not a little cold.
I guess that's why they call it LP, liquid propane.
Yeah. It just wouldn't transfer to keep up with the electronics in the water heater.
Yeah. Well, I experienced something new with this. So all around, especially in these parts where we are now in the Houston area, a lot of people have those whole home generators that will kick on in the event of a power failure. And the general idea behind those is after we get a big windstorm event in here, a hurricane or something like that, that you've got power and you can cool your home and keep on living and while we're going through the cleanup process. Well, they came in handy this time too, because when power went out, the generators kicked on. But I know two specific instances to where the generators failed because it got so cold that they were also not designed to run in such cold temperatures, similar to the larger generation plants and the issues of that happen there.
Right.
And so there's going to be a winterization process probably applied to that industry too, because if you're going to rely on those during the really cold weather events, they weren't really designed. They had components freeze up on them and they would shut down. They weren't.
Yeah. So your backup needs a backup.
That is true. I guess so.
Yeah, but again, you're in South Texas, South Central Texas, and you're talking about winterization.
Yeah, I know.
It's so alien.
It is something we don't ever talk about mostly, or could be, especially here, not really prepare for.
Yeah.
So I asked my wife this question, and I thought this was kind of relevant to the podcast, and four of us talking about this is, back in 1994, we had a flood. It wasn't a named storm. It was just a flood. And I lost a car in that flood. We had damage in a home, and it was just a really, really bad rainstorm. And then kind of since then, that was one of those, 100-year floods. And everyone makes the mistake thinking, well, that only happened once in 100 years. They don't understand that it's a 1% chance every year that happens. And so I think we that's a bad way to call that out, because people don't understand that, and they think that that's, oh, it's going to happen every 100 years, because since then, I think it's probably a 20 to 30% chance where we are of dealing with some sort of flood, hurricane, and now we're adding snow on top of this, pandemics on top of it. I mean, there is a number of things that I feel like you take them individually, and we all deal with it individually, but we don't ever plan for these things. And I just kind of looked at her and I said, I think we need to start planning for these a little more regularly in our thought process.
I agree.
Well, I also used to reference, when I was talking about selling new homes, fireplaces. If you've noticed, a lot of the designs that have come about in the past few years don't have a fireplace. In the old days, we always thought you had to have a fireplace for resale. You can't build a home without a fireplace. But the homes we're building in downtown Houston for the Millennials, there's no fireplace. And I used to joke, on that 1 week a year, or those couple of days a year when it gets cold enough to light your fireplace, is it worth putting that extra $3,500 into the house? That's kind of out the window now, because if you had a fireplace, you could heat up the home when you lost power.
Well, that, to your point, and I'm 100% guilty of this, is because we have a really modern style house. We went with one of those really linear gas fireplaces, and when it came to warm up the house, it looked really pretty,
but it didn't warm up the house.
It didn't warm up the house.
Yeah, we have a fireplace in our home, and I've actually never lit it. Maybe once to see if it worked and the flue wasn't clogged with something. But one thing we did notice, and once again, all fireplaces are different, and depending on how a home is designed, if they're designed to utilize the heat from a fireplace, or if they're designed because of the aesthetics issue and the look of a home must have a fireplace type thing. But either way, it wouldn't have done, it might as well have been a linear, I think, because it wouldn't have done anything to heat my home, because it wasn't designed for heat. It was there for show.
Right.
Yeah, which is fine. That's okay to do. But that it's a little unrealistic to rely on that to provide much heat relief.
And one of the things that the point that was driven home with me over the last 4 or 5 days with all the rolling blackouts and power outages and things like that was the fact that we only had one, besides our phones, we only had one source of light. And that was two if you count the candles. But we had one inexpensive lantern, and had it not been for that, it would have been a little touch and go, because it's hard to go in there and charge your phone when there is no power.
So you didn't have flashlights? I mean, that's part of your hurricane kit.
Well, we had some, but we didn't have the batteries.
Didn't have a battery.
And that's what I mean. Like when there's a hurricane, we all kind of prepare for a hurricane.
Yeah.
We don't prepare for snowstorms here. And that's just different. But now it's something that we've went through it. I think it's like Harvey. It's like there's got to be that outlier of flood. Well, okay, this can happen again, and we should expect it to happen again.
Right.
And
well, let's face it. There's a reason the term is called snowbirds. The folks from the north that move south to get away from the snow.
Yeah.
Now it's followed us down here.
Well, like we kind of talked about before, is me crawling around in my attic looking for a potential busted pipe that I thought was there, which fortunately turned out not to be there. But going through and just kind of looking around and understanding why some of my pipes froze and some of them did not. When I'm any new construction I'm on, I'm going to be conscious of pipe routing, and to a point to where the materials are a little bit more tolerant of that today than they used in the past when my home was built. But I'm certainly adding it. I've added that into my watch list now. I'm really going to be conscious of that. And in my personal home, I know where I need to get up in there and shore up a little bit more insulation and protection and things like that.
And that's a very good point, Randy. I noticed that. I was climbing around my attic yesterday also, and the blown insulation settles over time. And of course, all the pipes are in the attic, as we do in Texas, because the foundations move. And so as that insulation settles, your pipes become exposed. So if you've been in your home for more than probably 10 years, you need to think about getting some bags of loose insulation and just cover up the pipes again. And you may have to check that every so often.
Yeah,
great point.
Just to refer back to something we spoke about last week about kind of EVs coming into the world. When the power is rolling out, it's kind of this interesting thing. We have a Tesla sitting at 85% battery charge out in the driveway. And I couldn't use all that stored energy in there because vehicle to grid isn't a standard thing that we in home building have really prepared for that EV world. But as EVs become a bigger part of the makeup of how we drive and what's out there, that there is that potential backup. We're talking about generators and things like that. You know, that car at full power just sitting right there, that could power my house for days if I just had a way to hook it up to my house in vehicle to grid. So it's a technology that's out there. Elon Musk has tweeted it. The very first Tesla had the ability to do it, but no one used it. I feel like no one used it because it was a kind of a niche car, and you know, it was really expensive, and it was in California where the company started. They didn't have like hurricanes and floods and things like that where they would need that potential. But here in Texas, I mean, they're building the Cybertruck here, and it's the largest manufacturing facility in the world coming in our backyard. You know, I've got a Cybertruck on order, which has a 220 power outlet in the back of it. That would have been awfully useful to have in a situation where power was needed.
So could that electric vehicle become the generator of the future?
Yes.
Rather than having the generators that fail.
Right. If you had access, you know, the great thing about it, I went on and started doing a little research. And if you look for some Tesla stuff, unfortunately, there was a lot of deaths because people went for their car for heat and warmth in Texas.
Carbon monoxide, right? Yeah.
And there's kind of some really neat stories out there on Tesla that people were able to go to their car in a Tesla because it is powered, and it actually has a mode in there for camping that they put out last year. You put it in camp mode and you have full access to Netflix, all the stuff for the kids, can stay warm. And it's not an ICE engine that's sitting there generating carbon monoxide in there. In that, like you're talking about, that is a source of power in a bad situation.
Yeah, I said the generator of the future. It definitely could be.
Yeah.
So it's safe.
I can see that those trucks actually being at every single job site across the United States.
100%.
Framers, cornice crews, everybody.
That's why I was interested in it, is the ability to take mobile power somewhere in the construction industry. I see the benefit of that, but as in the real estate and home building world of preparing houses to take power like that, I mean, doing that saving one family just because you have access to something like that. Mac, you have some great stories just from Harvey going out and, you know, helping people boat out of flooded houses.
Oh yeah, it was. If we would have had, like you said, the Tesla truck at that point in time, I mean, there were hundreds, thousands of families that we could have helped.
Right.
But we just didn't have it, and it would have been super helpful.
Do the parts and pieces exist now that you could convert to take power out of the car?
No, the Tesla itself right now is not set up. There was a rumor that when they had Battery Day a few months back, that was going to be one of the announcements of the newer models coming out, but they announced that they are not putting it in the newer one. It's not 100% on the truck yet.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that in the truck, because there is a 220 power outlet in the back. I mean, 220 on a job site is amazing. I mean, that really is.
That's a game changer.
That's a game changer right there. I mean, there's a lot of industry trades that need 220 on a job site. And you're talking about bringing the world's biggest battery just to the job site. Right. You can power a lot.
Not only that, you think about it from a recreational standpoint. You take it camping or any of that.
Right.
I mean, huge.
Right.
And next week, I'm going vertical in a project, a group of buildings, and there's no power out there yet. So we'll be working on generators to begin with. And just having something like that available without the noise, the hassle, having to keep it covered with
the neighbors,
the whole thing, the neighbors.
Yeah.
Lugging around a very heavy gas-powered generator back and forth, and it takes up space in your truck.
Yeah, think about a framer at 5:30 in the morning that wants to start, and he has no power, and he wants to start up a generator. Of how much disturbance you would make in a neighborhood doing that.
Yeah.
And
well, think about a job site that could start 2 months sooner because now you have power on the job site without having to use a generator.
Right.
You've got it there. So you can begin construction.
We don't let power slow us down, Perry. We don't let streets slow us down. We'll go build before the streets are poured.
But it is just that one aspect of it. I see that revolutionizing the industry.
Yeah, I see it as something that is put in for a recreational side, that when it becomes a truck, and the body of the thing is made out of stainless steel, so it's the perfect work truck. You don't need to paint it. You don't need to worry about it rusting. I mean, they're taking the stainless steel from building the rockets out of Starship. That was the whole point. The stainless steel is coming out of Texas. It's a great thing, and it's getting put into a truck that's in Texas. It's the most Texas truck that you could get. Now, it might not be everyone's taste, but the ideas behind it, hopefully other people, if you don't like the style of it, hopefully it changes the game enough that other people start seeing the benefits of doing those things, because it will help the industry having that. But one of the biggest things I saw in home building was, can we get that power back into the house for that situation? Because I would have loved to have been able to, see the news down there and drive 45 minutes in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, not worried about the ice, and get to someone and help them out.
Right.
So,
and that the aesthetics are going to improve. I mean, that's
now he's building a vehicle that's not for everyone, and that's great. Every vehicle has their following. That's okay that people don't like it. It's not for everyone, but the ideas behind the vehicle, that's the ideas that are changing, and it affects our industry, that we need to be prepared for that, especially when you talk about solar in this. What happens if you had solar and you had a power wall with batteries, and you had a vehicle out there that could put that power back into your house, run your refrigerator, run your heater? That would be game changing.
Absolutely.
So has anyone, priced out one of those gas generator, whole house deals?
I price them every day. Right now, the going rate's about 12,000, 13,000 installed. When you look at the Tesla, again, I haven't done that much research on it. But
so the basic truck that's going to come out is $40,000. Okay. Yeah. But you're going to drive it every single day.
Right.
Right. The generator you're talking about, 12, 13,000, you're going to use it 3 or 4 times in its life.
Maybe.
Once a year.
And that really depends upon how much of the house you want to energize, because I've seen them as high as a 30 kW that can run 18 to 20,000.
Yeah.
And you can energize a 4,000 square foot house, every inch of the house.
Yeah. And most of my customers right now are going with a 22 kW, and that's running about 12, 13 grand right now.
Okay. Makes sense.
But think about, that same instance, if what you're able to do is drive that power to someone else. Not everyone, when this technology comes out, is going to have access to it. But if we as builders had a way in the electrical panel, and we started doing this and preparing for this, had a way to put that power back into the house through a power wall or some source like that, that we could deliver power to someone that needed it.
I wondered, there's a transfer switch that happens with the generator that converts that to electricity. Would you be able to do the same thing with the vehicle
you'd
itself?
need
a transfer switch.
Yeah, it's an inverter that you would take it from DC power to AC power and putting it into the house. But talking about basically putting the power back in we're not necessarily relying on the grid at that point when something bad happens, as we've seen happen a lot recently. Honestly, it's more than I would like to deal with, that's for sure. Every year it seems like I'm preparing for some sort of disaster, as a flood or power outage or something like that.
Yeah. And when that truck finally does arrive, everybody's going to want to be borrowing it every weekend.
That's for sure. So, let's kind of let's change topics here. So a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about that we mentioned real estate investing as kind of one of the goals and things that we're doing in the future. I wanted to come up and discuss this week about some of our real estate predictions in 2021 that we saw from last week. We were just kind of talking about in general. So I think if someone's listened to this, giving them a history lesson, we can do that in guides and books and training and stuff like that. But we kind of mentioned forecasting out and seeing what's going to happen in the show. And so I wanted to just kind of, we all know that a whole bunch of money just got injected into our economy, and that's going to have an effect on us. So have you, Mac, given any thought of like what injecting a couple $1 trillion is going to have an effect on us?
I think there's going to be a tremendous impact. And that's one of the things I think that's driving the market right now. I don't think that the average consumer really understands or appreciates what could be coming down the road in the next 12 months. I think what's driving this market right now, most of it is fear.
Right.
The fear of rising interest rates. We're already seeing historically high construction costs, material costs, labor's going up. It's just the whole supply and demand equation is completely out of whack right now. So I think that's a big subject to talk about.
Randy, have you seen like what is your thought on the construction cost in the future? I mean, do you see it going down?
I do see it coming down. I mean, mainly only on the fact that, everyone's talking about lumber right now. Lumber's high. And when it closed, I didn't check it before we started the show today.
Right.
But last time I did, it was high as it's been since like 1920, since I've been really tracking it.
Right.
As far as the 1,000 board foot price. So that will eventually come down. It everything that goes up comes down. So at some point in time, you anticipate those prices to come down. And the real key is to catch your lumber pricing. Right now, the lumber companies, if they're quoting a job for you, they're really only holding that price for about 5 to 7 days.
Wow.
And that's it, because it's so volatile in pricing. So when they lock in their contracts to buy their volume, they lock it in at a certain rate at a certain point in time. And so it going up and going down after they lock it in, they've got to move quickly to react to that. So the trick on our side is to be knowledgeable of where the pricing is at that moment in time. And when you start to see the trend, it's coming down the slide, you go to, if you got a project coming, you go and the timing is right, you're going to be getting your lumber pretty quick. Lock in on the downside, because you'll catch a little bit of the relief coming on the back end.
Well, Randy, you bring up a really, really good point, because everybody I'm talking to right now is asking me the same question. They're saying, what do you think is going to happen with lumber costs? Windows have recently gone through the roof. So there's a lot of products out there that are really going up. So what do you see as being an answer to that question, which is, do I wait until everything comes down? What are my risks on that side of it?
Well, the real conundrum there, Mac, is not waiting, because the market is so hot right now. What you're not building today, the customer is buying it from someone else tomorrow. So you don't wait. In my world and in our world, you start looking at, well, okay, we can't control lumber prices. I can't control the labor rates. We can go through and promise or not promise volume, and hopefully you get some kind of long-term good rate for that. But what used to be the case in there is not really the case in that anymore. After Harvey came through and everybody got flooded around here, labor rates went really high. Flooring, carpet, paint, all the repair work. The labor rates really never came down from there. They did a little bit, but they kind of stayed up there. They didn't come back down. Yeah, because they didn't need to.
Right, they didn't need to. There was no pressure on the labor rate to come down.
So go ahead, Perry.
So I was going to say, if you look at, because you talked about the lumber, the 1,000 foot price, it was around $250 at this time a year ago. Now it's over 1,000, so it's increased fourfold. What's happened traditionally, or historically, I should say, in the market is that when prices go up, whether it's interest rates, whether it's cost of lumber, cost of labor, the homes get smaller. Everyone downsize. They don't downsize necessarily, but they can afford a certain threshold of pain financially, so they shrink the house a little bit. Now, the challenge to that today is COVID, because houses began to get larger over the past year, and because people were staying home more often. So that home office that became their child's bedroom, now the child has grown up and has moved away and gone to college, and they say, well, let's move out and let's get a smaller home. Now that home office is back. So they can't go too much smaller.
Well, there's one thing that could be done, and you bring up a great point as far as size being important right now, because families kind of huddled more close together and living in more spaces. So what you do is you look at a way to start putting a product out there that uses less of the expensive stuff. And so you start looking at home design, product design. If you're in a situation where you have a say in how like a new product is designed, there are small ways that you could do to start using less of the expensive materials. We've noticed a big trend in the modern design look, and a lot of that is if you use the modern slant roof type deal, you can get away without having to put ceiling joists on above and start using the rafters as your ceiling.
Yeah,
it's a great modern look. It's a different kind of deal, but it also accomplishes the fact that now all of a sudden you're not buying half the lumber it takes to frame above floor space for that. So it's just different. You got to look at it from all angles and attack it from all sides.
It's revisiting that value engineering concept
Correct.
that we dealt with some years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what people should look at from a resale perspective is that new homes are going to continue to grow in price. The resale price should follow that. So just because your home that you were living in was marketed at $200,000 last year, it's got more value now. It was built on yesterday's dollars. So that resale product now that was selling for $200 can sell for $225, $230, because a brand new home, to replace it, they've got to spend $400,000.
yeah.
So go ahead.
You make a great point right there. I think there's a misunderstanding in our industry, Perry, of something you just said that I'd like to expand a little bit on, because you said it also, Mac. So the trend going around the conversation right now is urgency to buy now and prices going up. Okay. And that goes to my point, was when you inject basically 40% of our total dollars in the United States, that's called inflation. Okay. And that is that price going up, and that is buy now, because tomorrow your dollar won't buy as much. Okay. And so the annual inflation rate has historically been around 2%. That's what it is. It floats sometimes just over that and sometimes just under that, and our government tries to keep that in check. And that's what they do with interest rates, is they keep that in check for that inflation rate. So in our industry, because we have the only product that someone can buy and it appreciates in value. If you go buy a car, it's going to depreciate, and you're going to, for a business, you buy equipment, you depreciate it. But in a house, your personal investment, you buy it to appreciate. But people don't understand what appreciation is and inflation. So appreciation is the amount after the inflation. So what you're talking about, Perry, is exactly that. You're buying less because we injected a lot more cash. Well, in some markets, a house will appreciate. In some, they just inflate.
And then compound it with everything that's happened recently. So you compound that with the fact that because of COVID, because of the layoffs, because of the weather we've just experienced, so now it's harder to put new product on the ground. So you can't build as many new homes. Costs are up. Interest rates are down, but the cost is up. So you can't produce the new property. So you've got the older properties that have more value. Also, I saw today on one of the timelines I was looking at, the available lot inventory in the United States is the lowest it's ever been in history since they've been tracking it. So now, lot availability. So we talk about investors, we talk about where we're going to need capital in the future. Producing immediate lots is a big deal.
Yeah.
Being able to then help people, think about this, people that are selling their older home because they've never been able to sell it, now that home is valuable and they sell it, but they don't have a new home to go to.
Right.
That's why they're going to apartments. And so the apartments have become more upper scale. They're more for a family instead of just a young person that's graduated from high school and didn't have a place to go. They're now being much more upper scale apartments. And that's why the rental market is so strong with duplexes and condos and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, so that kind of gets in back to that point of you've got a hot market, right? So there's less of the supply and there's more buyers wanting into it. So the market's going to be appreciating because there's more demand in there beyond just the inflationary rate that's going up. So if you own that house this year, it's going to be worth more next year, but in a hot market, it's going to be worth a lot more. And that makes it tougher on that first-time home buyer, that low-end price right there next year to get in. So if you're looking at investing in the market, now is the time to do it, because if you wait, all it's going to do is cost more. You're going to be able to buy less, and the lumber and all the materials are going to be more.
It's something that this really floored me last week. I was calling around some of the other builders and talking to some of my friends, and asking them, how are you guys responding to all the recent price increases? And in the past, when we've had these major spikes in pricing and such, it was in low lot inventories. It was always the builders, and especially the big box builders, the commercial guys or the big national guys, that would come in and fill that void. They would fill that vacuum. And what we're seeing now is a really interesting dynamic that I've never seen in the last 40 years, is that some of the big companies are saying, hey, we're not going to be doing any build jobs, any individual dirt sales. We're only going to be starting specs. We're going to control that inventory. And that's going to even place a higher pressure on that demand, on that inventory.
I was looking at the Austin market last month, and most of those builders only release a certain number of homes, 5 a week.
Precisely.
That's it. So you sell those 5, you get on the list for next week. And to buy a home in that market right now, you're on an 18-month waiting list.
You're starting to see lotteries again. I haven't seen lotteries in decades, but we're getting back into that environment again.
Yeah, that's right. Really important to pay attention to. If you're buying a home or investing a home, the decision to wait later is always going to cost you more. And that's an interesting thing in our industry. It always seems to be a question of when to buy. And I'm always able to answer that. Look what a house cost in 1950. It's inflation. That's what it is. It appreciates and it inflates and it goes up.
Well, in last week's show, we talked about homes being under $100,000 because some of us have been here 41 years building houses. And we talked about in the 80s, you couldn't buy most of the homes that were built were under $100,000.
Right.
By the late 80s, they'd gotten over 100. By the 90s, 200,000. In today's world in Houston, Texas, they don't even track sales of new homes under $300,000.
Right.
And
so that's the starter home.
Yeah, if you look at real estate, yes, in real estate you have bubbles, you have ups and downs. But if you do it like anything, like the stock market, that arrow points up. So everyone's here to weather the small times, but the historical question of that was, when do I buy? Well, buying whatever you need, it's a house, it's shelter, it's for a job. There's a reason behind it, not just strictly investment. Yes, it is an investment, but the decision to buy it now is super important, because to miss an inflationary cost increase that's coming to everyone.
Well, put this in perspective too. The 2 largest population bubbles in the history of our world have been the baby boomers and now the millennials. The millennials have passed us because those of us that are baby boomers, our generation is dying. We're getting older and we're dying off, and we're transferring that wealth down to the millennials. And so from an investment perspective, invest in smaller homes. Millennials don't necessarily need to be building 6,000 square foot monuments to themselves. To them, less is more. They want something smaller, more efficient. And so build those duplexes, build those townhomes, build the inner city stuff. There's still plenty of the baby boomers around to buy the larger homes, but now rethink the less is more attitude, more modern, like you were talking about, and build that more modern product, because that's what the millennials want.
So if we were to kind of summarize that and say that the best real estate investments in 2021, that would be your recommendation.
I would look at, as I've been traveling around the country looking at different opportunities, there's cottages are really big now. They used to call it the tiny home. Mm-hmm. Now they've upgraded it to a cottage. And that's where a lot of the older retirees that don't have the children at home with them anymore, that's what they're purchasing. And then, of course, the millennials, they like that too, because again, less is more, less yard to have to maintain. And you can build smaller and you can build taller.
That's, what, Randy, you can kind of talk about, but the projects that we're involved in right now with duplexes, new construction duplexes.
Yeah, I'd say every project that either I've got under construction or about to come out of the ground, in our project included, first of all, it's all new construction rental properties. And they're all going to investment groups or individual investors or someone buying 2, and they've got the wherewithal to do that. The demand for that is, right now, it's very high for all the reasons that Perry spelled out and where we are with that. So, but duplexes in specific, and there's reasons behind that, lots of reasons.
Yeah.
The time frame to build them is shorter than a triplex or a fourplex. If you're building a true duplex product, even if it's an attached 2-unit townhome, you just have two lots and there's one building attaches 2 units, that's still considered a duplex. So code wise, firewall construction is different than putting 3 or more together. You also historically, and most of the time, you could find existing lots on the ground that you could fit a duplex building on an existing single family. Now today, at least projects I'm involved in, we've got sections of communities being developed specifically for duplex buildings. So the trend, the market has turned to that, where 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen new construction rentals built in the master plan communities. Today, they're asking for them to come in.
Very true.
So I kind of see that leads into this other thought that I have is the reason, if you were an investor, that you got into a pre-existing house was you were going to basically buy it as a wholesale situation. You were getting it, and then you were going to fix it up, and you were going to try and take it from a Class B problem to a Class A product, right? But the challenge that you find in that is you might be doing it in a market that is only inflating, not appreciating, and because it was an older home. People left that area, and now you're attempting to bring them back with remodels and stuff like that. And there's places in the country that happens all the time.
Yeah, it's called a fixer-upper.
Yeah,
that's what you were talking about, buying a fixer-upper.
That's a classic.
California, that happens all the time.
Classic flip.
Right.
But think about this, for exactly what Randy was saying is that if you're an investor, and this is something we should do on a future show, as a matter of fact, is that we should make available to our listeners investors that help them and educate them how to get into the investor market. Because you don't have to have a great deal of money. Through group investing, if you have $20,000 or $30,000 to invest, and we put you together with 3 or 4 other people, that could be $150,000 that could build one of these duplexes, and now you own 1/5 of the duplex itself. And we know they're going to rent out. We know there'll be people lined up. I recall recently we were discussing one of your projects. You sold 24 homes in one day to investors. That's something that wouldn't have happened in the past prior to now.
That's a good point, Perry, because that's just one of many of the menu of services that the 4 of us at this table can offer to. It could be individual investors, investor groups, people that have challenges and need some solutions.
It's our network. It's what we deal with every day.
Yeah.
So I think that the investor, I think what Randy is seeing, though, is there's an opportunity now to invest in new construction, AAA products that were never available to an investor, but they had to go do a fixer-upper. There was nothing available to them. Now the market is actually kind of saying, here's a product that I don't think a lot of investors are understanding is there because it is new to...
They didn't know it existed.
They didn't know it existed.
Right.
It is new to our industry. It's new to, especially in the volume. There's always been the onesie, twosie type of thing, but the rate that we see it today, the large name builders that are doing it today, there's big names behind a lot of these projects out there, and it's something that is available to an investor.
And it's as I mentioned before, it's a transfer of wealth from the 50-somethings and up that now have the capital available to them, and they don't want to play the stock market, and they put it into real estate because they know that historically it's going to increase, and they're providing homes for people that they envision to be mirror their children or their grandparents, whatever it might be, the smaller homes that are more efficient, that have the ability to sustain what we just went through with the weather.
So maybe next week what we do is maybe focus a little bit on, we could actually target kind of like the financing options of how that younger investor would get into that situation. You brought up some good points, Barry, of like, how does that happen? There's a lot more different ways than just a conventional loan when it becomes an investor situation. Owner-occupied loans, everyone knows about a conventional loan, but what are the strategies if you're a young investor and you want to buy one unit and live in one side and rent the other side out?
The gentleman in Austin I was speaking of earlier, he did exactly that. He's 28 years old. He bought a duplex. He lives in one half of it and leases out the other. And that carries his expense on the other side.
It's a great strategy.
It's practically living for free.
It's a fantastic strategy.
Yeah.
I think, Randy, you see that a lot of investors coming in. There's just not the knowledge that it exists out there. And so maybe we can focus on a couple of topics like that on, let's say you do find the project and how do you finance it? I mean, because there's all levels of investors, from an individual that wants to own or occupy half of it, rent out the other side, to some guy that might want to own 4 or 5 buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on all levels. It's the last full completed project that I was involved in. We had a little bit of everything. We had people buying multiple buildings on 1031 exchanges. We had someone who is, I would say, a middle tier investor that could finally come in and can add 2 or 3 buildings to a portfolio. We saw the new investors, someone brand new, young, usually they're young, to the market, when they felt comfortable asking questions. And I'm always comfortable answering questions. Anybody that wants to ask a question about what we got going on. But there are lots of great questions. So you kind of see it on all angles. But there's also extremely large institutional investors that are putting creative deals together financially that are going very large and going, I want to invest here for this product and then here and here and here. And whole companies are being built, new companies are being built because that very large institutional arm is coming down the way to do large tract purchases of the new stuff.
So what I'm kind of getting the idea that maybe we should do for the listeners, though, is since this is a newer topic, maybe we ought to kind of do a master class of the 4 of us. We could record some outside the podcast, kind of a training and a walkthrough, because you do have, the beginner investor all the way that just wants to own or occupy one side and lease out, and he's getting started that way, and his financing options versus someone else, because there is such a diversity in that market and it's a newer thing. But maybe we could establish kind of a master class from all the way at evaluating, the financial return on a new construction investment property, all the way through how to own it and when you should sell it.
And Randy brought up a good point. The 1031 exchange program is fantastic because you avoid capital gains and you're taking that money that you made from the previous real estate investment and rolling it into a larger investment. And it grows. You're growing your own mutual fund. It can become your own IRA, your own 401k. And I've seen many people do it. The 1031 exchange is the exact way to do it.
That's a good
good
topic.
future class.
It's a good future thing that we could put together. And as we do those things, as we do the show here and we come up with topics and stuff like that, we can kind of build that list and reach out to the viewers in the comment section, and let's hear from them. If there's any interest in there, we can let them have feedback on the show. And if they had some interest in learning more on that, we could develop topics and we could develop things that they wanted to know specifically and kind of use our knowledge to help guide people into a really good decision.
It benefits everyone.
Yeah.
Great.
That's a great idea. Good topic to kind of specify.
So kind of next week, what I was thinking is we'll cover the portfolio lender as something that we might introduce people to. That's a different type of lending versus a conventional loan. So we can get a little bit deeper onto that topic. And then maybe a little bit more on a product spotlight that I saw. I was using this thing called the Zilculator.
Come again?
The Zilculator.
The Zilculator.
Yes.
Please explain.
Okay, so it basically it's for evaluating an investment project. It's a kind of takes Zillow information which runs out and grabs MLS data, pulls it in, and gives you all the financial tools right in front of you to put together a deal. But it allows you to compare multiple products at one time. And so it might be something, as we're doing that master class, as a tool that we do a specific video on how to evaluate a deal, your return on investment, all the numbers that you would look at as an investment, but being able to compare 5 or 6 properties all at once right in front of you.
These are live for sale properties?
Yeah.
So it kind of takes that mortgage calculator that we're all familiar with and takes it to the next level.
Right.
Because now from an investor perspective, you're comparing multiple existing products and seeing which one gives you the best return.
Yes, exactly.
And here we were thinking you just made that up.
I did Zilculator. I mean,
Zilculator.
It's kind of fun to say, Zilculator.
Here, what I think it would probably be easier if I put a link below in the description, since everyone's kind of like the first time hearing about it. I thought it was very helpful. So I'll put a link below to the description, or in the description, to the website that'll take you to it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I
That's
will
a good
definitely
idea.
explore that. I'm curious about the Zillow.
Well, also spell it for you, because right now, if you ask me how to spell the Zillow, I'm going to strike out on that one.
So then this is something that people can actually go to our website. They can look below and they can access this Zilculator.
Yeah, I'll put it below on the YouTube video itself, right in the description there. So, yeah, you could do it off the website when I put it there, but it'd probably be easier just to put it in the description below the video.
Okay.
And just click it right there, and it'll take you over there.
But all silliness aside, seriously, you found it helpful in what you were looking for?
I did, especially when we were looking at kind of doing another project. And I have some Excel stuff that, anytime I know that I'm doing something in Excel, I'm always like adding a cell or, trying to calculate something else in there. But I don't have the pictures, and it really is helpful when you've got the properties right in front of you to remember, okay, this was the one that I feel like I had to put $10,000 in. This is the one that was pretty much good to go as is, and then look at them because it grabs all the picture data from Zillow too. So the little report's right in front of you, and I don't have access to that when I'm doing it in Excel.
And can you do this by zip code or by region, or how?
It's just taking
specific?
the Zillow information that you would have in Zillow and just pulling all that MLS data, and then you have the pictures from there, and then you just plug in what you think the rents are.
Because I have seen, I don't know the name of the software. I've seen a software in the past where one of my investors, we were looking in the Florida area, and he would choose some zip codes and identify a certain product in that area, and it would tell him what the average rents were, what the sizes were, what the requirements were, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you can do the same thing with this, but also with pictures.
You're putting the data in to this calculator. It's basically Zillow information with a calculator. Zilculator.
This sounds like a perfect tie-in to the CMA, the competitive market analysis that we're going to be talking about. That's
that's a good point, because
Can I point out that we lost the cat?
Oh, we
Don't
lost the
notice that?
cat. The computer. Well,
Are we updating?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have to revive the cat for for the next episode. So the cat went MIA. I don't know if he needed food or what.
Does
but
the cat have a chip? Can we find the cat again?
I think we can find the cat.
the ultimate cat nap.
Why? Yes. Yeah. He used one of his 9 lives.
There we go. But you bring a good point. We talked before about CMAs, and that's something that people don't understand. And I say realtors live and die by the CMAs. And for those of you that don't know what a CMA is, it's a community market analysis. So when a realtor says to you, I'll run you a CMA, what they're doing is they're looking at all the homes that have either sold or closed or are currently listed in your community over some period of time. Usually they'll do it from 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months. But there's information in that that's not utilized. So one of the things we talked about as a future class, maybe for the master class or whatever, is to educate the buying public. How do you read a CMA? And what information is beneficial? Because that helps you price your home. In today's market, with the houses selling as quickly as they are, if you look at the DOM, days on market, not identified, just says DOM, and it's anything less than 30 days, that means that the homes are selling faster than 30 days. So you're underpriced. People get excited. I sold my house in 1 hour. Why are you excited? You just lost money. You left money on the table.
True.
And that's what we want to teach everyone. So we will have a future class on CMAs, how to read them, how to utilize them, what they mean, how to access them.
Yeah, because that's a different story to an investor versus someone selling their home. That is their financial kind of savings, is their home. And then if you undersold it, they're super excited because they're not pros in the market. They just needed to transfer jobs or situations or something like that, and they liquidated that asset, but they did it under value.
Right. And for that matter, they can become an investor, because now with today's market, as they sell that home and they get more money than they were expecting, they need to buy a new home. Yeah. So they sell the older home, make more money than they had planned for. They buy a new duplex or a new 2 homes, and then they become an investor. So there's an opportunity.
I personally, Perry, am very interested in that topic as far as learning more about it, because in my situation, in my home's an older home. It was built in the 80s. It's remodeled some. I haven't put my hands on every piece of it, but I've just recently, in the last couple of years, maybe a year and a half, I get letters and phone calls all the time. I want to buy your house cash. I want to buy your house. It's someday I might have a bad day and come home and go to heck with it. I want a smaller place. You know, my children are adults now, so they're basically out of the house. But sounds like without doing some kind of research with a knowledgeable expert on that end, I certainly wouldn't want to leave money on the table. So something like that would be very interesting.
Well, see, and put it in perspective, the fact that there is a business now for people calling you to say, I want to buy your home, that tells you there's an inventory shortage in the United States.
Right.
And it's a supply and demand. If you're the only house, when you look at the market, you look at a CMA, if you're the only home on that street and it's a desirable street, that means, and you're the only home that's available for sale, you have no competition. That's what that means.
Well,
Take advantage of it.
Keep in mind, Randy, you get to that point, we got your back.
Yeah, I know. I feel I have insider information when it comes to that kind of thing. But I know that if I'm getting them, then all my neighbors are getting them.
Absolutely.
And honestly, the last 3 real estate transactions on my street have gone to investors, which is fine.
Right.
We got some good neighbors, and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's the old traditional put the sign out, wait for a while. There's not. I mean, half the time there is no. They just sold and they went.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell one more story, and then I know we're going to run out of time soon. But I had a young couple, not a young couple, of friends of ours came to me last week, and they said a home on our street sold for $185,000, and I said that's amazing that there's even a home in the neighborhood that's that inexpensive. And she said, "You think I can sell mine for that?" And I said, "I've never been to your home, but you can sell for more than that. That home sold too quick." And she said, "What do you mean?" And then she goes on. She said, "I was trying to buy another home over in another community, and I put an offer in over the asking price, and my offer did not get accepted." I said, "You're telling yourself the solution.
That's right.
The home you're going to move to is you're getting more than asking price, but yet you don't think the home you're leaving is valuable. That tells me that 185 should have been 225, and what you will sell it for is 240. But you won't know until you ask. That's the simple.
Seeing that every day.
Good point.
Hard to believe that an hour has just gone by.
Yeah,
It's
so
amazing.
I think we kind of defined, what we're going to do next week. So I think next week's show, hopefully we can still maintain our Wednesday release. I think we should be able to. So just check out for the show on Wednesday. And I wanted to thank everyone. I think it was a great, insightful. I think hopefully our listeners kind of gained some knowledge. I know I did. I think we all kind of, every time we get together, I think we gain some
And as
knowledge.
you've stated before, or one of you in the comments, if there's something that we're not giving enough information on, ask us.
Yeah,
Please let us know.
we can incorporate it into the show from the comment section. So
Absolutely.
just like the cat, and we promise next week we'll get the cat back. We'll figure it out.
I mean,
We'll find another life.
The
4 of us would admit we know a little bit more than we knew yesterday, but not quite as much as we're going to know tomorrow. So we learn off every comment and interaction. So
Great. All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Absolutely.
It's been fun.
All right.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
all right, great.
You've been listening to the Buildology Podcast. We have home building down to a science. Perry, Randy, Mac, and Justin have over 100 years experience in the building and real estate industry. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to pass on our YouTube channel to others. The Buildologist. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.